some of the mega tech companies are just building their own data centers, right? And they're not going outsourced to these REITs. So Zuckerberg announces a 1 gigawatt and 5 gigawatt data centers. The scale of this is absolutely unfathomable. And I just want to be clear, 5 gigawatts is as much power as a large city takes. And just to put this into context, Dallas consumes about 3 gigawatts, Chicago 3.5. There are only two US cities that I'm aware of that consume more than 5 gigawatts, and that's Los Angeles and New York. So when we are talking about 5 gigawatt data centers, these are unbelievably large. Talk to me about what this announcement is.
Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg, he did an announcement on Threads talking about these data centers, and he put a picture of the data center overlaid over top Manhattan. It looked like one of those ships from the movie Independence Day kind of coming in to destroy the city. As you noted, the scale, my goal today talking about this news is really to frame up the scale for listeners, because it's easy to see this news and just we've had such a cavalcade of good news and announcements. To be able to understand just the scale we're working with is very difficult, but it is going to be phenomenally important to understand what's going on in artificial intelligence right now. So let's talk about what this means in terms of dollars and cents. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, he said, and I'll quote him right here, I'll read the quote, every gigawatt is about 40 billion, 50 billion of revenues to NVIDIA, right? Every gigawatt of data center is about 50 billion. Roughly, let's say. So every gigawatt is 50 billion. And so when somebody is talking about 5 gigawatts, that math is pretty clear. And that's the end of the quote. So if you take Jensen Huang as face value, well, look at these announcements from Meta. They're going to be the first to build out a 1 gigawatt data center. That's their goal. I believe it's named Prometheus, which again sounds like some from the movie. I think that's an alien movie. It's like Alien Pro. So, we're definitely getting pretty sci-fi here. And then their goal after that, the one that looks like it's the size of Manhattan, that one is 5 gigawatts. So if you take NVIDIA at its face value, that is $300 billion worth of addressable market to the company. Now,
just from Meta,
just from Meta, just from this current build out.
Right.
How much money was NVIDIA making top line in revenue a year and a half ago in 2023? It was 60 billion. Just the first data center is the entire size of NVIDIA a year and a half ago. And again, the math is easy. If you do 50 billion times 6 gigawatts, that's 300 billion just from Meta alone. This is mind-boggling stuff. And of course, Austin, the other thing, that's an addressable market to NVIDIA. Companies like Broadcom. Broadcom's been working on a custom chip with Meta. This is very likely going to benefit them in a significant way. This is going to benefit people downstream, because when we look at Meta months ago, if people go back and listen to the podcast after DeepSeek, we were talking about, is Meta going to cut its CapEx for this year?
Just ramping.
And we had said we believe that wouldn't happen. And then they've announced acceleration. I believe it's to 72 billion this year on the high end. They'll probably go north of that. These two data centers, when you do the math, it's roughly 10 times what they're going to spend this year. So, Austin, this is ambition on the scale of Stargate, maybe even more, which was in itself huge ambition. And, I think we need to frame this up with what is happening and why Zuckerberg is making this very real all-in bet around artificial intelligence. I was watching an interview with him yesterday. It was for the website, The Information. And Zuckerberg said he believes that there is a very real shot in the next 2 to 3 years we'll have what's called artificial superintelligence. Now, I know we've talked about artificial superintelligence in the show, but it is worth mentioning artificial intelligence simply will be the biggest event in human history. I don't think many people even watching this show, let alone the general populace, have any conception in their minds that we are on the precipice of something that could be bigger than The invention of fire for whatever 12 people first were able to capture that. Electricity, cars, everything throughout time that was epochs in human history. We are maybe on something of that level. And that is what Zuckerberg is seeing. So, what does ASI mean? It means artificial intelligence is likely self-recursive. It begins improving itself. It means that we probably have breakthroughs in scientific domains that we didn't imagine previously, fusion power, healthcare, to just an unbelievable degree, and almost certainly means that we'll see a faster acceleration in the need for compute than anything we've even talked about before. So, Austin, I'm not here to say that ASI is a certainty. Far from it. We need some breakthroughs before we could talk about breakthroughs in actually the actual AI algorithms before we could talk about that being the end game here. But, imagine if you're Zuckerberg and believe this, it would be like being a human and being the only one to have heard from an alien that they're coming to Earth in 2 or 3 years. How would you change, or what would you do? Like, this is the scale of change that someone like Zuckerberg is seeing. So let's take this away from, kind of sci-fi, pie in the sky talk, and let's talk about what it means to investing.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of this podcast, we've said, well, the conventional wisdom is AI spending is in a bubble. We've said it's actually economically supported far more than people believe. Facebook, for example, or Meta, I should say, I've broken down the numbers, and their ROI on AI just from improving their products was running at something like 16 to 17%. They were seeing the majority of their revenue growth from AI. It was very positive spend. At this point, Meta is taking spend beyond the rational economic argument. This is, in a way, a bubble in the sense that if ASI doesn't happen within a near-term time frame, they will almost certainly be overspending. But that being said, if Zuckerberg and to an extent Sam Altman, this becomes a belief that is common across technology, well, what are the next implications? We've already seen an announcement of a similar size data center from Abu Dhabi in the Middle East. Think about the implications of national security, of almost every single country feeling like computing is essential to their defense. How much do countries spend right now on national defense? How much would they spend on computing if it was the lifeblood of the economy? And you begin to see the truly outsized rates where within 5 to 10 years, the economic paradigms of the world we live in are completely different from today. And that's the future Zuckerberg's betting on. So Austin Altman is to some extent, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he's making this bet. This is Zuckerberg planting his flag in the ground on a belief system that is so outrageous, it's inconceivable to 99% of people you talk to, 99.9, and it is happening. It's real. In a way, it's a more fantastic future than I would have imagined when we started this podcast less than a year ago.
When we put it in those terms, suddenly the name Prometheus for this data center makes sense, right?
Yeah,
bringing fire down to the people. I have to say, Silicon Valley is on a naming roll right now. I mean, Facebook is a kind of lame name. Google's a kind of lame name. But like in the last few years, we've gotten Anduril, we were getting Prometheus, we're getting Stargate. These grand, ambitious sci-fi Greek god namings. I'm enjoying this new era of company naming, even if the Lord of the Rings aspects have gone a little far. But let's. I want to react to some of the things you said there, and then move on to our next topic. We're talking about world paradigm shifting technology here. We also want to position ourselves to benefit. Some of the names you mentioned there, Broadcom designing special chips. Let's also remember that Google, with their TPU processor, is a client of Broadcom, and they're working together on this chip. So Broadcom can benefit from multiple players dumping capital into this space. And I also wanted to put into context some of the things that you had said, about these companies already seeing economic benefit from AI, even if people in the world are like, well, I still get my coffee at Starbucks from a barista. Where's AI? How about this? Google, 25 to 40%. I've seen estimates in both range, but 25 on the low end, 40% on the high end of what percent of Google's code is currently written by AI. The internal cost savings these companies are seeing are in the tens of billions over multiple years, which already just underlines the economic value of this. And that's before it sort of jumps out of Google or Meta and starts being injected as sort of this substrate layer in our entire lives. So there's incredible economic benefits. And you had talked about something which was these AIs being able to train themselves. And if that sounds really bizarre in sci-fi, I would remind people that we already started to see a version of this late last year in 24 when AI models were running out of data to train on, and we had this sort of synthetic data breakthrough where AIs were creating more information to train themselves on.